Good evening from Tel Aviv. It was bound to happen. It couldn't continue that on all our borders chaos would be taking place and everything would be totally quiet here in Israel. Well, about an hour and a half ago, that quiet was shattered when missile alerts went off in northern Israel, and immediately a number of missiles were fired, immediately a number of missiles landed in northern Israel. One of the missiles was intercepted by the Iron Dome defense system that had been moved to the north recently. It was the first time that Iron Dome had successfully intercepted a missile coming from Lebanon. It previously had done, of course, many intercepts from Gaza. It's not clear who fired the missile, although most expectations are it was some Sunni Salafi jihadist group in Lebanon opposed to Hezbollah. It's an area that's controlled by Hezbollah, but Hezbollah and those groups have been fighting one another in Syria, and somehow that fighting has spread partly to Lebanon. Why they did it? To show that Hezbollah is not fighting Israel and they can, just because they hate Israel. It's all very unclear. What is clear, of course, is that Israel seems to be constantly the cause of all the problems in the Middle East. Just listen. The Syrian foreign minister today blamed Israel for inciting people for the chemical attack that took place yesterday. More on that chemical attack in a moment. The day before, Erdogan of Turkey blamed Israel for the coup against Morsi in Egypt. It was Israel that was behind the coup to take down Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood. Israel is responsible for all the evil, and everything that goes on that's bad, Israel must be the ones who are responsible. It is a little problematic, obviously, and it's particularly problematic when it's coming from Erdogan, who is the leader of one of the largest countries in the world and a member of NATO. But Erdogan seems to be obsessed with his hatred of Israel. Everything that Israel does has to be wrong, and Israel is responsible for all the evils that have taken place in the world. Israel and the Jews. A real problem with Erdogan. But we'll put that to the side in the meantime. In the meanwhile, the world is still discussing what took place yesterday in Syria. It's not 100% clear, but it seems more than likely that Assad used chemical weapons on a large number of his people yesterday in a Damascus suburb. It's illogical. Some people have made the claim, well, he couldn't possibly have done it because he wouldn't have done it when the UN inspectors were in his country. It was done by the jihadists. On the other hand, it's unlikely the jihadists would have killed 1,000 of their own people. Finally, in the crazy, convoluted logic that doesn't exist around here, it could have been Assad who figured that he could do it now because no one would think he would actually do it when the UN inspectors were there. Following that? I don't. And it's not at all clear what's going on. What is clear, however, is that this took place 1 year after President Obama said there was a red line, and the red line was the use of chemical weapons in Syria. Chemical weapons have been used in Syria. Clearly they have been. And clearly we can't remain quiet much longer. We've been quiet much too long. The use of chemical weapons is something that has not been done very often in recent history. It took place once by the Iraqis against the Kurds. It hasn't taken place really since World War I when it was outlawed. In all of the massacres of World War II, chemical weapons weren't used in part of warfare. They were used against us, the Jews. I mean, certainly killing us in the gas chambers was some use of chemicals. But the use of chemical warfare in the battlefield, which was outlawed at the end of World War I, is something the world has observed ever since. And we've allowed it to be used by the Syrians against their own people in a civil war that has now taken 100,000 lives. This is Mark Schulman reporting from Tel Aviv. Good night.